Hello everyone, it's season 12, episode 34 of the Ubuntu podcast. This week we're going to discuss a mountain of feedback that you very kindly sent us. Then we'll have a command line love, and then we'll have more of your feedback. So that voice you hear chuckling away is Martin. Hello Martin, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm very well. You?
Yeah, not bad at all. You've been off gallivanting, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I've been in Vancouver this time. I've been at the product strategy sprint for Ubuntu 2004.
So this is the thing where planning is done for what's going to be in 2004. Desktop, server, cloud, everything. Foundations, the lot, isn't it?
Peeking behind the curtain, we run these cycles at 6-month intervals, and people will be familiar with the releases of Ubuntu Server and, Ubuntu Desktop. But we have all these other products and services, and they all work on the same cadence. So even though the distro release is set in stone for those 6-month releases, everyone else is working on all their other products. So Juju and Maz and Kubernetes and OpenStack and Ubuntu Core, Snapcraft, Snapd, the design team even, everyone is aligned on this cycle, and we all figure out what we all want to do and then make sure that everything we want to do, the other teams that we depend on have capacity to help us achieve our goals. So we have these week-long sprints where we basically present what we want to do and have a little bit of horse trading to make sure that everyone else can help everyone else achieve their goals.
So it's a bit different for you this time round, because previously you only ran the Snap Advocacy and Snapcraft and Robotics team, and this time you've got a tiny little extra team thrown into your plate, the desktop team, right?
Yes, just a small team of, little significance that nobody pays attention to. So, yes, picking up the reins heading into an LTS release is both thrilling and daunting in equal measure.
You don't have a lot of time because there's Christmas in between. So people go on holiday for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, this is a really short cycle. So the last cycle we did, 1904 to 1910, I think that was a 25-week cycle. And then for this one leading into the LTS, because of, Christmas and New Year, and also people tend to take sort of slightly extended holidays around that period. It's also summertime for our colleagues in the Southern Hemisphere, so they like to take a bit of holiday in that cycle as well because the weather's good. So I worked out that on average we're looking at about an 18-week cycle at best for, what we need to do.
But it's an LTS, so it's not like you're landing loads of shiny new features. It's stability and steady as she goes, isn't it?
Well, fortunately, as far as the desktop goes, there's not too much new and shiny. It is that, polishing that diamond that's been, created over the last 18 months. There will be some new features. We'll keep our powder dry on that for a later date. But some of the other teams, they are, going to be delivering significant new product developments, and they don't have a lot of time to do it. So, there's a lot of pressure on this release, and, there's a lot of focus on the LTSs. It's they're massively important and have significant adoptions.
I'm glad there's a lot of focus on it, given it's focal.
Oh, I know. Mark picks those names well, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Right, let's get on with it. So recently we had a little discussion where we talked about, I think we called it, are distro hoppers the worst Linux users?
I didn't think we posed the question. I think we made the statement that distro hoppers are the worst.
Oh, they are? Oh, okay, great. Well, that would probably be why we have had a ton of feedback. And it's worth noting, we have had feedback via every single possible channel you can reach us. We've had emails, Telegram messages, posts on Reddit, like letters written in the sky with a plane, everything, every way in which we could be contacted, we have been contacted.
Even comments on our Facebook page.
Wow. Gosh, someone blew the dust off that.
Yeah. It got the second time this year that's been used.
So let's dive in. We've got a whole bunch of these. We thought we'd break it out into an actual segment because there was so much, and so many of you spent a lot of time typing very lengthy, thoughtful replies. A couple of them slightly angry replies, and unfortunately, we can't read all of them out. We have read every single one of them, I guarantee it, but we can't read them all out because there's just so much there. So we've cherry picked some of the threads from a whole bunch of you. Do you want to kick off the first one, Martin?
So Robert Lundgren emailed us and he says, it's not only that the grass is greener on other distros, they have an entirely different type of grass. The only thing that stays consistent throughout the distros are the brown patches of over-fertilized grass, which then makes you wonder if other distros have fewer brown patches or softer, more full-feeling grass under your feet. The fragmentation is to blame for distro hopping culture, if blame is to be given at all. Regarding filing bugs, bug trackers are bugs by themselves. It should really be as easy as posting an issue on Reddit with a couple of flags or tags attached to your bug report. I do file bugs occasionally, but I don't enjoy the process. I loathe the process of filing bugs. I could expand on the issues of filing bugs, but I've rambled enough now.
He has a point that bugs are difficult to file and it should be easier, but look at it from a developer's point of view. If it's too easy, then we get one-line bugs that say this is broken and no data at all. And when you're the most popular Linux distro on the planet, you get tons and tons of bug reports. And if you make it even easier, you'll get even more of those utterly useless bug reports. And I think it's unfair on developers to subject them to it doesn't work and then having to spend all their time teasing like blood out of a stone the version number of something or what command was executed. So it's a tricky balancing act, and I'd love to see us try and solve that, but I don't think any open source project has solved that really well.
What I would say is the act of posting the bug is as easy as posting on Reddit. Finding where you post the bug and what you should put in the content of the post, now that is the hard part, I agree. And as you say, it's getting that right that helps developers. I mean, I know there are members of the desktop team that spend an hour every day going through the new bugs that were filed in main for the desktop and doing that initial bug triage. There are people on the desktop team that have been doing that every day for 15 years, an hour a day for 15 years. So it's not an insignificant amount of work, even once somebody's filed a decent quality bug, just to do the first triage, let alone actually fix it.
Next up, Tom Brezza emailed us. I've listened to your distro hoppers section. I wanted to add my view to your conversation. I like to classify myself as a pragmatist. If I can, I like to stick with the defaults. But if that doesn't work, I look for another solution. I think your view is too flat and doesn't really cover this topic correctly. Bugs is one of your arguments, is that distro hoppers don't stick around, and even if they report a bug, by the time you get to it, they've moved out. But is it fair to expect a user to stick with the problem for, in some cases, months or longer? If you have something that doesn't work, would you wait in hope that the developer might contact you 6 months later while you can't use your machine to perform certain tasks you wanted to do? How is that different from a person who only uses one distro and finds an alternative solution by removing one piece of software and replacing with another? Yes, it's certainly fair to say that if you've got broken software and it is actually not serviceable at all, then why would you continue using it, right? But you still need to tell the developer. Like, it's no good just switching and saying, well, that's broken. I shouldn't be expected to carry on using this because it's broken, because it's not fit for my purpose, right? And then just dump it and use something else, because it's still broken and it's never going to get fixed because you didn't tell the developer as you left, as you walked out the door, you didn't tell the developer that it's busted. So it only works up to a point. And I appreciate that you might file the bug and then leave, but I don't think every bug can be classified as a showstopper. Like there are plenty of bugs which are definitely not showstoppers. There might be weird UI glitches. The theme might not look right. A certain particular application might crash now and then, or the icon disappears from the tray, or whatever it might be. None of these are showstoppers. I mean, they might be depending upon your level of tolerance. But I think there's still room, because lots of bugs are not showstoppers. There's still room for people to file bugs and stick around.
Yeah. We broadly talked about this in the original segment, but if you find a distro that broadly fulfills your needs, then consider sticking around through thick and thin. And if you find these issues that bother you, if you make good representation for those issues and get involved in the project, then it won't be, months and months or years to having things fixed, because you're showing willing and helping to get involved. And if there's another individual who's behind improving the quality of the distro maintainers will pick up on that and they'll want to work with you.
I think some people have this perception that you file a bug and your job is done and you walk away. But you've got to remember that on the other side of that bug, there is a developer or a small team of developers, often just one person, one other human being. What you're effectively doing is sending them an email, right? And I don't think it's unreasonable for that person to reply and say, yes, that does look like it's broken. Could you provide some more information? Or could you try this patched version? Or could you add this BPA? Or something that provides a bit more help. I feel there's a theme that a lot of people have hooked onto, that you file a bug and then suddenly it's massively technical and you have to compile your entire system from source as soon as you've done that. There are levels in between, and if you interact with the other human being via IRC or mailing list, or even just via the bug tracker itself, you'll often find that they're very nice people and they want to help you fix the problem.
Jonathan Staples emailed us and he says, "Your feature on distro hoppers got me thinking. I've been using Ubuntu on and off since Dapper Drake. I wouldn't describe myself as a distro hopper, but I've definitely been guilty of some of the behaviours you described in the show, namely sticking with Ubuntu because it configures most things for you and is easy, and not contributing back to the community. This is not out of malice, but more ignorance. I wouldn't know where to start. My knowledge of terminal commands doesn't extend much beyond sudo apt update, and whilst I could copy terminal commands from the web to fix things, I feel this is a bad idea if you don't understand what the command is doing, and by just copying commands you won't learn anything. So my question is this. For someone like me who has an interest in FOSS but isn't a developer and comes from a mollycoddled Windows background, what's the best way to get involved? Learn what we're doing and ultimately give something back. My question is this. For someone like me who has an interest in FOSS but isn't a developer and comes from a Windows background, what's the best way to get involved? Learn and ultimately give something back. Should we learn to code or something else? So I would say, no, you don't have to learn to code. The best way to get involved is to actually start a conversation within the communities. Talk about the issues that you're encountering and see if other people have found those issues too. Quite often, there will be other people that have found those things, and then you can figure out, well, how do we file a bug in a way that is useful to the developers, and how can we collaboratively test potential fixes or confirm and triage bugs. And this is basically, installing or updating software and running through some, click this thing, do that thing, did it work, did it fail type exercises. So I would say become a part of the community in a small way and help to address the issues that you're finding that are causing you frustration.
I've cited this on numerous occasions. I'm not a developer. I don't write code. I'm not, there's no program anywhere in Ubuntu that I wrote, right? There might be rubbish shell scripts here and there on the internet that have got my name on them, but I wouldn't call those like software. And I know we could have a lengthy argument about that. Let's not bother. My point is, No, you don't have to learn to code. And for a long period of time, when I first contributed to Ubuntu, I did nothing like coding. I was answering people's questions. So if you want to give back, just go to Ask Ubuntu and click on the unanswered thing and filter by the thing you know about, because there's these tags that let you filter, and just start answering people's questions. Or the flip side is, if you have something you think might be a bug, ask a question. Go to Ask Ubuntu, press the Ask a Question button, and ask. Say, I'm doing this thing happens, this feels like a bug. And the people who help there will either point you to where the bug should be filed, or they answer your question and say, no, it's not a bug, that's how it's supposed to work, or run this command to undo that, or change the behavior in some way. So there are certainly ways, and IRC, the Ubuntu IRC channel, there are lots of knowledgeable people in there. And it's rare that people ask a question in there that hasn't been answered recently by somebody else. And so they have a bot that sits there. And, if you ask about upgrades, someone will type !upgrades, and the bot will answer with links telling you where to go. And so there are these resources, these places you can go in order to speak to other people in whatever format you're comfortable with, whether it is a mailing list, there's an Ubuntu users mailing list, whether it's IRC, Telegram, or on a forum like the Ubuntu Discourse or Ubuntu Forums or Ask Ubuntu. There are plenty of places where you can engage with other like-minded people. I would encourage anyone who feels like they're on their own and don't know what to do to contribute, reach out to all these places.
I would also like to just sort of dispel this, mystique around developers. You don't need to be developers to contribute in a meaningful way. Taking Alan as an example, I know that Alan came to prominence to the Ubuntu project for being the leading contributor to Ubuntu in the way that is scored in Launchpad using Karma. And you achieved that purely by doing Q&A and support on Ask Ubuntu.
Yeah, totally. It was just tech support. That's all I was doing.
So not a developer function, came to prominence in the project and ultimately got hired by Canonical because of your outstanding contribution.
Oh, stop it.
Well, I'm just pointing out, you don't need to be a developer to have a meaningful impact.
Yeah, totally. George from Tulsa emailed us. In my view, that much of the distro hop impetus is created by Linux influencers, especially podcasters. Talking about what's new is sexier than talking about how to make things work. And, for example, it's really difficult to explain how to get the most from Plasma Desktop in audio and have an audience at the end of the podcast. My participation in supporting distros has been cash. I've sent money to the for-profit Canonical as tips because I value what the company has done to make Linux a click and install practical desktop alternative to macOS and Windows. But bug reports? I've no idea how to submit a bug report and probably couldn't tell if I suspected a bug was caused by an application or the underlying OS. Here's a utopian suggestion: a universal bug reporting form, one which reveals in plain and understandable text what's been reported and leaves no room for the possibility of the report exfiltrating confidential data from the user's system. Good comments. Thank you, George. Thank you so much for financial support. That's very kind. Thank you. I think the key thing about filing bugs, you don't necessarily have to know which application caused the problem. I made a little video. It's 2 minutes long. It's on my YouTube channel, PoopyDC, and it just shows how to file a bug. And you just run a command, Ubuntu bug, and hit enter. You need a login to Launchpad, but you may already have one of those. And it's just signing in like you would sign up for an Amazon account or whatever. But that walks you through the process. You don't have to know the name of the package or whether it's a platform bug or an application bug. You just type Ubuntu bug and it walks you through the process and asks you, where is the bug? And how does it manifest itself? And do you mind if I send this data to Canonical? And tells you what data it's going to send. So we kind of already have that, but it could definitely be made easier. So yes, your suggestion of a universal bug reporting form was actually on my wish list about 4 weeks ago, I think, when we talked about what we would like to see in Ubuntu 2004.
Yeah. And I may or may not have had talks with senior people within Canonical about realizing that idea of
Oh, that's handy. You're a good person to know, Martin.
Yeah, it turns out, yeah. Well, we'll see, but that it's a great idea, and there's definitely a theme emerging from this feedback from distro hoppers around filing bugs. So you can't ignore, admittedly a small data set, but it's a theme that's emerging here.
And I should say, following on from that, Dennis Burrows made a similar point and said, I appreciate your discussion in Season 12, Episode 32 about distro hoppers and contributing to projects by filing bug reports. Dennis says, the problem I have is that when I have a problem with a piece of software, I usually assume I'm just doing something wrong. How do I go about determining if it's a bug, ignorance, or improper setup? And again, either just file the bug or go to Ask Ubuntu or ask another human meat bag who knows a bit about Ubuntu, and there are a lot of us around in various places, as I mentioned earlier. So my answer to that is ask someone. You shouldn't be expected as a user to know where to file a bug. You should be able to talk to other human beings, though.
The benefit of open source projects is you can file a bug. And if you don't know where to file a bug, as Alan says, there are places where you can find out from other people and they'll help signpost where you should go to file your bug. And if you have something that you are not sure if it's a bug or not, file it anyway. The developer will tell you, oh no, that's a feature request. We don't have that capability. Or no, that's not a bug. It's intended design to work that way. And they'll politely, deal with those issues as well. However, if you go to a bug tracker and you're basically asking, how do I, that's not a bug. That's the place you go for Ask Ubuntu to ask, how do I do things? Bug trackers are not technical support. They are, you have found a defect or a deficient feature and you want to bring that to the attention of the developers. That's what the bug trackers are for. If you want to know how to do a thing, go to the tech support forums for that stuff. Mark Sangwing, he emailed us and he says, I found the distro hopping discussion very interesting on a personal level. Even though I've used Linux for almost 20 years, my employer's closed Windows ecosystem kept me locked to brand M for getting things done. Linux was a hobby, and as such, I was free to hop in any way that put a kangaroo to shame. There was no risk and nothing to lose, so I literally tried them all from one end of DistroWatch to the other. Makes me smile every time I read that sentence. But when I left big business a few years ago, I was able to switch to Linux full time, and my taste for distro hopping vanished almost overnight. Once I was depending on my Linux for my livelihood, I found myself valuing stability over variety. Luckily, all that experimented illuminated my way forward to the perfect Linux distribution, and I've been a dedicated user of the distro that shall not be named ever since. That's a callback to a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah, good point. Chen Chang emailed us. In the show, you talked about distro hopping and why it's bad, but I think distro hopping does have positive impact to the communities. Though staying on the same distribution, I stayed on Ubuntu for the past 2 years, you'll have a better chance of finding bugs and help improve the distribution. Smaller distributions will never grow. So by distro hopping, people can share to their friends what unique features in this other distribution has that no other major distribution has and can improve both. We don't need to stop people from distro hopping, but tell people how to properly do it. Don't distro hop every few days. Try it for at least 2 weeks. Learn about it and share. Yeah. That's absolutely fair. It's a great idea to try out new, interesting other Linux distributions. Absolutely. But I would totally recommend, if you're going to stick on it for a bit, get involved.
Yeah, I would add to that, 2 weeks is not long enough. I think if you're going to evaluate a distribution and get familiar with it and decide if it's for you, you need to spend months with it before you move on. And for those of you that love to try out new stuff, there's a friend of ours, Zeb, you may know him from, other podcasts and what have you, such as Destination Linux. He is a distro hopper. He tries lots of different distributions, but he's gravitated to Peppermint as his main OS. So that's what he has installed on his machines. That's his workaday distribution. That's what he uses to get stuff done. But he's constantly installing other distributions on other drives. One, because he reports on this stuff on the podcasts he does, and he's using it as a learning experience. So you can sort of distro hop in a responsible way in order to sort of satisfy your own curiosity and self-development. But when you do find one that you like, try and stick around a bit and try and add some value to its community.
You suggesting 2 weeks isn't long enough. I've seen people say 2 hours is too long, and they couldn't last.
It's okay that they're wrong.
Yes.
Alan Auckland emailed us, and he says, I know this is not an easy topic and there is no simple answer or solution, but I feel understanding other points of views and angles will help. I'm concerned that you chose the last episode to broach the topic and share opinions on distro hoppers, a term coined by Rocco from Big Daddy Linux.
Objection.
Oh, hello.
No, it wasn't coined by Rocco. It's made popular recently by Rocco, and I have deep respect for Rocco, but he didn't coin the term distro hoppers. It's been around for many years.
A couple of decades at least.
Right. People who hop around from one distro to another. We've always been calling them distro hoppers. It's just a common term.
Anyway, Alan goes on to say, it somewhat feels like you have set yourselves up to ensure you receive a ton of hate mail and have an excuse to no longer continue with the podcast, which would be such a ridiculous shame and a massive loss to Ubuntu and the wider community.
Objection.
Uh-oh.
So Alan seems to think that was our last episode, and we all did this for the clicks, and we just did it in order to trigger feedback. We had no idea we would get this amount of feedback, and we didn't do it to annoy people. It was a genuinely held belief that I felt that it was something we needed to talk about. And I said to the guys, shall we talk about it? And they said yes. So don't feel like we're doing this just to annoy people or we're doing it to try and clickbait our audience. That's not the case. We just thought it was an interesting topic to talk about. That's all.
Also, you'll hear most of the feedback here. And as you will have heard, not hate mail. There's been useful discourse here so far.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alan goes on to say, that said, I would like to add some thoughts to the points that you raised. Firstly, any use of Linux is acceptable use providing the user is acting responsibly and within the law. I feel only the authorities would be able to discern this. To say anything else would be classified as bullying / harassment. For our most precious commodity is time. We all have an unspecified amount of time on this planet to achieve the things we need to do. With this notion in mind, for many users, they just want to solve the issue they come up against as fast as possible so they can get on with the thing that they need or want to do.
Okay, so I don't think it's bullying or harassment to suggest to people that they might want to contribute to an open source project rather than quit and start using a different open source project. I think it's a constructive, helpful thing to suggest that you might want to actually help make the thing that you're getting for free better. And I also have an objection to the suggestion that the user's most precious commodity is time. What about all the time the developers put in to make this thing you got for free? Does their time count for nothing? I think it's a strange perspective that I've seen a lot of people suggest that I don't have time for this. And yet you're consuming something completely free that someone else put in a huge number of hours to create.
And again, not just developers, but, people working on translations, digital artists, designers, those people that are contributing to the bug triaging effort, there's lots of people investing lots of their time, a valuable commodity, in order that you get something for free.
It's very one-sided to suggest that, your time is somehow more valuable than a developer's time.
Yeah. Alan goes on to say, when you're in the supermarket, we make these decisions almost subconsciously. How many of you choose brand B because brand A didn't have one ingredient that made your room smell amazing? Do you write to brand A and tell them that they lost out on your 50 cents because you didn't have ingredient X? No, you really don't think to do it. And if you did, you wouldn't go out of your front door. As was said in the episode, many bugs are never fixed. There are many reasons for this: complexity, moving on, and more pressing matters.
I don't like the analogy with a shop, because you got this for nothing and somebody else created this, and it's not like you had to pay for it, and someone else can have a copy of the thing you have. Like if I buy a thing off the shelf, I buy it, consume it, throw it away, I've used it, right? Nobody else can benefit from that. If I download a Linux distribution, use it, learn a bit more about it, contribute back to the distro, or pass the distro on with some knowledge to a friend, then that has force multiplied the existence of that distro. That the analogy to buying a physical item in a shop just doesn't work here.
Yeah, also the feedback loop to things that you buy in shops just isn't there. You may have a telephone number for customer services, and you might complain, and you might get some vouchers to buy their product discounted in the future, but you don't get to improve it or, push it forward in any meaningful way.
Yeah, there's no community around air fresheners. It's just not a thing, but there is a community around software.
Alan goes on to say, have you tried to think about how much time, effort, and energy would be involved to fix an issue that a user would come up against?
Yeah, he then goes on to highlight searching for how do I fix a bug and find some documentation, which is really lengthy and complicated. And I'm not suggesting that that's what you should do. I'm suggesting that people should start on a much lower rung of the ladder. I think what Alan did was dive into the top rung of the ladder first, whereas you could do that. If you had some background in software development, you could pick up that documentation and start contributing, right? But I'm not suggesting people who have no developer experience suddenly start fixing bugs. The first bug I ever fixed was a one line. In fact, it was one character in a command line utility. And I absolutely did not go and read loads of documentation. I sat with a friend who walked me through how to get the source code, walked me through how to file the bug, because I filed the bug and he said, you could probably fix this yourself. And I was like, no, I can't. I'm not a programmer. And the program was written in C, I think. And I've never written a line of C in my life. And I can't even read it. But with a friend helping me, we were able to step through the code and we actually found the line, and I just added an extra character to that line in order to make the field wider, and it just worked. And it took a while, but that first patch was so fulfilling that when I submitted it upstream and the developer said thank you, I now know that one character is on basically every Linux distro. And I wrote that one character. That was my one line fix. And I feel so proud of that. And it's like, it is objectively the smallest possible patch you could make. It's not even a one-liner. It's a one character. But I had help. And I think that's the key takeaway message is don't feel like you have to do this on your own. There are plenty of other people out there who will help.
Yeah.
Next up, Predator 8-Bit posted on our subreddit, Ubuntu Podcast. I don't know where to start on this one. I'm part of the problem you described. The really interesting part for me was when you mentioned all the things which go into installing an OS, partitioning, setting up software. All that effort, which in theory could go to helping with the distro, and the idea that we all feel inadequate in the beginning, but I can't help but notice myself struggling with simple things such as grabbing new software sometimes, because compiling never works for me. I don't know how to do it at all. I follow the steps and get nowhere, so I really don't know how I would be of help to anyone. Although I can't help but wonder how I got into using Void Linux, it really isn't geared towards me. I just thought the package manager would make it easier to compile from source. The description on their wiki made it seem like it's made to do that. Yet I still can't get some simple software, so I deployed Bedrock Linux on top of it to install one of the programs I craved from Ubuntu or AUR, can't remember which. So this kind of reinforces that point that, if you're a beginner and you're just trying things out, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that you would suddenly become a developer and know how to compile software. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have the perception that this stuff is hard, because it is. It's not straightforward. Compiling software wasn't designed for end users. Like microwave ovens are designed for end users and they have a big button on them that says start, right? This is not a microwave oven. It's way more complicated. So I don't think you should feel bad not knowing how to contribute.
Imposter syndrome is a real thing. We all struggle with that. I will walk into a room of my colleagues and I feel like the least skilled person in the room. That's just a fact of life. So you just have to get over that sensation and get on with connecting with people who can help you. Marco Benef posted on our Facebook page and he says, I'm listening to this week's episode and disagree on your opinion about distro hoppers. People use their PCs to actually do things, and there's nothing more frustrating than trying to do something and having to spend hours to fix hardware issues that you never encountered before when you were using other operating systems. Those kinds of problems are the grave of productivity. I landed on Ubuntu in 2004 after some months of distro hopping and decided to stay because Ubuntu solved some hardware problems I couldn't solve with SUSE or Mandriva. It basically enabled me to finally switch to Linux. After that, I felt at home with Ubuntu and have never changed. But it's because I'm lazy, not because I think changing is a bad thing. Distro hoppers are people who, 1, are trying hard to stay on Linux and who are looking for a solution that they couldn't solve by searching over on the forums. And 2, they are curious people, willing to explore what's new, who are so interested in the matter that they want to know what it's like to use something different. Choice is difficult when you have so many options, but that's also one of the most interesting parts about Linux in the first place.
Yeah, I think you're right in some ways that there are different classes of people who either stick or twist based on, how they're feeling, whether they feel like this is a homely place for them or not. But I think most people do find a home somewhere. I think that's where we concluded, is that there may be people who switch, like people like Zeb and Rocco, who do it because it's a hobby and it's part of a podcast they do. And I too am lazy. I can't imagine having to set my laptop up all over again with either the same or a different distro. So I completely empathize with the laziness side. Totally.
Indeed.
I think that wraps up all the feedback on that subject. I'm sure we will get some more. Please appreciate, we didn't mean it in malice. We're not trying to offend anyone or get clickbait. It's just a topic we wanted to talk about.
But it has been extremely useful because it's definitely highlighted an issue about filing bugs and how to get started. And one of the other bits of feedback that we didn't cover was someone was asking, have we ever addressed how people can contribute? We have a few years ago, but if we come back for another season, maybe that's a segment we can revisit.
Absolutely. Thanks for all the feedback, everyone.
If you love the command line as much as we do, send us a command that will blow our minds, and we might even mention it on the show. Send your command line love to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
So this week we have a command line love.
Per Moberg emailed us asking what tool we had discussed in the past that was like Union FS. So I went back and looked, and it was when I was talking about setting up a new home server, and the tool is Merger FS, and it's a featureful Union file system. So there's a link in the show notes to that. And if you want more information about Merger FS, have a listen to Jupiter Extras podcast, episode 28, where they have an interview with the lead developer of Merger FS, and you can find out what its unique properties are and why it might be the solution you're looking for.
So in the size of a tweet, this was the thing that lets you have multiple disks and have folders on all the different disks merged together as if they look like one big file system.
Exactly that.
We love getting your feedback. If you've got a comment about something you hear on the show, why don't you drop us an email on show@ubuntupodcast.org.
Oh, no, not another one. It's time for some more feedback. Neil emailed us show@ubuntupodcast.org.
He says, the introduction to SVG talk was also an OggCamp highlight for me. At the end of this, I pointed you to Boxy SVG, handily packaged as a snap, for making fancy presentations out of SVGs. Sadly, whilst Boxy SVG is almost certainly an excellent tool, it's not the one I meant to mention. I couldn't remember the name at the time, but Sozy is an excellent zooming presentation editor and player. Sadly, not yet available as a snap, but we'll have a link to Sozy in the show notes.
Torrin Doyle left a comment on our website.
You couldn't pay me to use $Edge, Firefox forever.
Well, ironically, they used to pay people to use the Microsoft browser. They incentivized people to try and drag them away from other browsers. So actually, they could pay you to use.
Perhaps not you, Torrin, but other people.
Jim Berman emailed us.
I was listening to the discussion asking if anyone would use the Edge browser on Linux, and I'm almost the perfect use case. I'm a network engineer for a Microsoft-based enterprise, and I use Linux on all my computers. While Microsoft has made strides in getting their online offerings to work well on Firefox, Chromium or Chrome just work better at the moment. My solution has been to use Firefox for all my web needs outside of Office 365 applications. This has the side benefit of keeping email, spreadsheets, etc. confined to a Chromium browser. Edge coming to Linux will allow me to use a browser with official Microsoft support for my work documents, and I plan on continuing using my normal browser in a dedicated browser.
Ah, that's a neat idea. Yeah, I do that separation thing as well. I can totally see why some people might have a philosophical objection to using Microsoft product A over open source product B. But I think once the thing's out, people might want to take a look at it. Because as I understand it, they're doing some interesting and innovative things that might set it aside and make it not just be yet another Chromium-based browser. But we'll have to wait and see. Brad Campbell emailed us.
In Season 12, Episode 28, you talked about creating something like the Windows Feedback Hub. How about take that idea and turn it into a contributor hub? Having an installed app with links and information about all the ways to get involved and information to the bug reporting feature would be a great thing. I've been using Linux for a number of years, and I have submitted one bug report to Ubuntu Mate, but that's been the extent of my involvement. Something like this could really point people toward the areas where they could easily contribute with their skill sets.
Yes. Every time this comes up, I keep thinking, we should do this. We should totally do this.
I agree, and let's see if we can get our way and make that a thing.
Kelly Jones emailed us.
I keep hearing about GNOME Desktop only using one thread, and this leading to instability for some. Is this indeed a shortcoming of GNOME? Are other desktops able to use multiple threads? Please have a short discussion on the topic. Okay.
It'll be very short because we don't have a lot of time left.
Yeah, I had to skill up. So, yes, in oversimplified terms, GNOME Shell is implemented using ostensibly Mutter and JavaScript. And because JavaScript is at play here, ultimately everything ends up in a single thread. Now, you can have things running in multiple threads in the Mutter process, but it will eventually get, bottlenecked down to one. And this is a stability issue when you're running on Wayland, because Mutter is implementing much of what the X server would do for you if you were running X. So when that process crashes, it takes the whole session with you. So that's the instability concern there. And there are some discussions in upstream GNOME to address this by breaking things out into separate processes, but that's some ways off and it's a lot of work. So watch this space. Maybe things will improve in the future.
Dennis Schimmer left a comment on the website.
It could just be me. I don't think you guys realise to what extent us, just the users out there here in podcast land, consider the likes of you to be tech rock stars and almost heroes. Sure, I realise that you're just regular guys, but as a daily user since Ubuntu 8.04 and following your rise to fame, you seem to be on another level to me. That said, when I listen to something like Martin discovering GNOME clocks, it really strikes a chord. Even the most accomplished among us Linux users can enjoy the same kinds of things. A clean, efficient, safe, usable, useful, elegant tool created by someone who really cares. Think of how many of your favourite distros or programs fit that description. Kudos to the countless non-celebrities who labour in love behind the scenes to give us what we enjoy so much. P.S. Not a single distro hop or new compave since 8.04. And P.P.S. he says he's been a listener of this podcast since episode 1 and misses all of the hosts that have moved on over the years and wishes Mark all the very best with his new adventure with his family.
That's very kind words, Dennis. And you know that whole feeling you might think like tech rock stars, and I often say to people, I'm just some guy, you know. When I go to events, I'll give you a concrete example of this. I went to OggCamp, and there's a guy there called Terence Eden who made a number of things. One of the things he made was a website I use called Open Benches, and I saw him in the bar with his other half, and I had to pluck up the courage to go and say hello because I was like a giddy schoolgirl, because these people are people I look up to as well. They're developers who've made successful products and launched them online, and I see them in the same way that you might see someone who works for Ubuntu. So I can completely empathize with that point of view, and I really appreciate the comment. So thank you very much for leaving that comment on the website.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words.
And I think that's all of the feedback.
Gosh,
I promise. So last week, Martin, you said that was the longest episode.
Yeah, I know, right? I used to think it was you that kept us running to time, but now I realise it was Mark.
So thank you everyone for listening. We do actually only have 2 more episodes before the end of the year. Then we'll take a break. We have to keep reminding you of this because people forget and they think we've all just disappeared off the planet. But we might have something special in the new year as well. We'll wait and see. If you want to keep in touch with us once we do go off the air, drop by Telegram, ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram.